Please go ahead, Chair Ramusi.
No. Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members, DG, my Icasa colleagues, and all those that are attending on the platform. Chair, I think before I could start,
we can't see your face. We can see your screen and your background.
Yes. All right. My apologies. Yeah, once more, good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, DG, my colleagues from Icasa, and all other participants on the platform. Chair, we're here just to come and share with yourself and the committee on the work that is being done by the authority in relation to the rapid deployment, and we'll give you an insight in terms of preparations for the upcoming local elections. And lastly, as you may have noted, Chair and members, we have an item on data expiry matters. Now, I will take you through in terms of the issues and challenges that we may have in expanding on that matter. But firstly, just to thank the opportunity, and following our presentation on the 4th of August, you'll recall that when we came before the committee, we did announce that in our past financial year, one of our main objectives was to prepare the ground for the next coming years, especially with some of the regulatory interventions. Noting what government has already committed itself that by 2030, through the National Development Plan, there's a need for us in South Africa to ensure that all South Africans have access to good quality of networks, affordable and secured.
Sorry,
now,
Chair.
The issue around rapid deployment.
Chairperson, my apologies. I don't know if we missed an explanation on this presentation. It doesn't seem to be the first one that we were sent. You may have spoken to it. I may have missed it. Just to check, this is now a different presentation from the one that was sent from to the committee.
Chairperson, I think maybe from our company secretary, the version that I have, it has been I've been informed that is the version that was shared.
Hajira, can you explain?
Chairperson, this morning we received this version to indicate that it's a consolidated form that's going to be presented to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, but we should take it that the information that members would have had and obviously gone through before remains the same. It's just in consolidated form. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Chairperson.
Okay, you may proceed, Chairperson. Councillor Ramusi, you may proceed. Have we now lost the chair? Could I ask the Icasa company secretary to just check what's happening with the chair?
I'll make a call on the side, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody want to come in and take up space until the chair comes back?
Good morning, Honorable Chair. It's Councillor Mushi. Am I visible?
You are audible, you are not visible. I don't know what it is.
There we go.
Now you're visible.
It was my camera, sorry about that. Chair, I will be taking the committee through the end user and rapid deployment presentation. and Councillor Sithole will be doing the municipal election part. Let me also just apologize for the different presentations. We did just augment the information, but it remains the same. We just thought that, you know, with every presentation, the background is also important.
Person of SABC, can you please mute your phone? Okay, you may proceed, Councillor Mashini.
So I was saying we just thought to augment the presentation that was sent earlier, information for, you know, just to make sure for completeness, but the information remains the same, Chair. The context is the same. And if I may just proceed to the next slide, I will start with end user. This is just the background as we thought to include it. The next slide, I just want to go to the crux, the others. Yeah, we can stop on this slide. Chair, I'm not sure to what extent should I be explaining where we are, considering that the regulations are now in court. We have received papers from Vodacom and MTN who indicated their intention to review the regulations. And not going into too much detail, Chair, just to say that the issues that they raised with regards to their concerns that where we are allowing transfer of data, unlimited transfer of data, we may be introducing a secondary market, and therefore resulting in arbitrage. And I just want to maybe just take the members quickly through what the current amendment is on the transfer of data, as well as the out-of-bundle charges. That's where we have also made amendments, as well as the rollover of data at least once. The next slide. So what we have done is on seeing that data expiry continues to be of concern, what we did in the 25-26 regulations is that we changed the default position where opt-in was a default, and we then changed it to say consumers must opt in to be charged additional, so that it is not just automatic that when your data expires or when you run out of data, excuse me. I see Chairperson is saying they lost power in Midrand. That's why he got cut off. So I will continue, Chair, until he's able to maybe connect on his mobile. So back to opt-in consent. The default used to be that the default is that you opt in until you alert your operator that you don't want to be charged. We changed it to say the default must be that if you run out of airtime, your services must stop and you must opt in to be charged out of bundle rates, which are higher than your normal bundle rates that you would have been paying. So this has led to bill shocks, and we were not happy with you know what continues to be complaints on bill shock. The second one is on automatic bundle rollover. The previous rule was that you would request to roll over, and now we're saying there must be a bundle rollover of any unused bundles automatically without the user having anything. When you hit your expiry date and you still have 10 gig, that 10 gig must roll over and at least once, so that you can still continue to use the value. Then we also introduced a sequential bundle usage, because you can imagine that if you have bought 2 bundles, you wouldn't necessarily know which one is going to expire first. And to help the consumer there, we then introduced a rule that says, let the bundle that expires first be the one that expires. So that at least, you don't have to be keeping tabs, which is practically impossible to on which data bundle is going to expire. And we also introduced the free transfer, where in the past you would have to buy a bundle to initiate this action. Now we're saying the consumer does not have to do anything, buy additional data, but just be able to transfer bundles to anyone on the same network, however. And the rule is that if your bundle would have, say, expired on the 10th, and you transfer it on the 8th, it will be transferred with the same rules, terms and conditions. So it will still expire to the person you've transferred it to on the same date, meaning the transfer does not extend the bundle. Then also that whether you lose your bundle because maybe there was a network fault, the licensed operator must then refund that unused bundle. What we also considered is that the bundles that are 7 days or less, that are promotional bundles, should not be subject to these rules, considering that such bundles come with a lot of value for the money they would have been purchased for. So we did not want to erode that market, and because we know that this is the market that most of our prepaid users use. They buy those 5 rand bundles to use for an hour or so. So these bundles, promotional bundles, 7-day or less bundles, are not included. So, Chair, I will just highlight that the papers, high level, what we are reading out of them is that the MNOs are not happy with the fact that if somebody buys a 100 gig bundle and they slice it up to transfer, share it with their whoever, members of the family, friends, and you have bought it in Gauteng and somebody sitting in Limpopo. Now, all of a sudden now there is traffic happening elsewhere. When it was planned for Gauteng, it is now happening in Limpopo. And our argument is that that should not be a problem, because people in Limpopo should have the same bandwidth, to still use the data, because the data is on the same network. Then they also saying we are eroding product differentiation. And with that, we are seeing a pattern that could suggest that there is some level of collusion, because we are not sure why is it that operators are affected equally by these rules the same way. Why do they offer the products that look almost the same that get now affected by these rules the same way? We have not done studies, but this is just an observation that is concerning to us, that it cannot be that when we are saying there must be competition between operators offering different products, now it looks like the products look the same. There is also concern about the technical feasibility, and we still don't understand that argument until some evidence is provided to the authority. And there's always a concern, a complaint that Icasa is basing its regulation on a lack of RIA and a regulatory impact assessment. And without, putting a lame excuse to say we do not have to do it, as there is no obligation on Icasa to do it. We also do not have the budget, but there is no formal legislative requirement for us to conduct a RIA. Mostly we follow the market, we follow what our consumers are telling us, and we do get questions about data expiry that we then had to go back to our regulations to see how we can strengthen these regulations and try and protect some of the concerns that have been raised. Chair, that is as far as I would explain where we are with the process on end user. Let me then move on to rapid deployment. Next slide. rapid deployment.
Before you do that,
Yeah.
Councillor,
Sorry?
okay, please proceed. Please proceed. We'll take the chairperson. See, he's back. We'll take him at the end if there was anything that you wanted to share with us. You may proceed.
Thank you. So on rapid deployment, we issued these draft regulations in 25 following the ministerial policy direction that directed Icasa to develop these regulations, mainly to streamline the regulatory processes and procedures that would accelerate broadband rollout. We relied on Section 21, read with 22 and 23 of the ECA, where Icasa is given powers to develop regulations on processes and procedures for accessing land for the deployment of electronic communications network and facilities. Now, what has and also to come up with a dispute resolution mechanism between licensees and any landowner or affected parties, and establish a framework for compensation. And lastly, to provide a geographic information system database that would do a GIS mapping, afford us enable us to do a GIS mapping of the infrastructure that is on the ground. Next slide. Now, without going into what is in the regulations, our attempt at these regulations is obviously limited to our constitutional mandate and the powers given to Icasa. And the feedback that we got the most was that Icasa was expected to draft regulations that would instruct municipalities on the way leave application process, the fees that are being charged for way leaves, and how to also, what's the last one? The way leave approval process, the fees, and the timelines, because the complaint is that municipalities are a bottleneck for licensees to roll out their networks, because they do not know what different municipalities apply different rules, they charge differently, and also, you know, you never know when you're going to get your way leave, because also there is no central common rules. And Icasa teased out in the oral presentation the fact that COGTA has issued a standard draft bylaw that actually addresses all these issues that we were battling with in these regulations. And the question was, why are the municipalities not adopting the standard draft bylaws? And they remain voluntary, as far as we are made to understand, and therefore any municipality, you know, can adopt or follow their own processes. The City of Cape Town was amongst the respondents and those that submitted written representations, and they were also at the oral hearings. And they also explained to us that they are not following that model draft bylaw, but have gone on to design their own and implemented their own way leave application process, which takes 2 days, for example, to process a way leave depending on the application. And Chair, what we then are bringing to the committee is the legislative hurdle that we cannot regulate local government. The powers allocated to Icasa cannot be extended to municipalities. So the way that we had drafted the regulations is merely to regulate our own licensees in terms of the processes and procedures they must follow when they approach, for example, landowners and affected parties. In some instances, we recognize the tribal authorities, and we then did a mandatory consultation process. Given the complaint that we had heard from the licensees that in some instances, they are not allowed to operate and roll out network infrastructure in tribal land. And we made it mandatory to say, to deal with that hurdle, make sure that before you enter into land, you have done your consultation. We've also drafted a sort of a dispute resolution mechanism where we encouraging parties to, have a mediation and avoid going to court, because this is one of the costs that some of the licensees cannot carry, going the court route. So the regulations are written in a way that they are more of a trying to mediate than to enforce a certain rule of law, because we cannot, we regard that to be a regulatory overreach. So that is where we are with these regulations. We had given the licensees 14 days after the oral presentation to do some supplementaries on the questions that we raised and that they still needed more time, asking them how they think Icasa can deal with these hurdles beyond what they regarded as regulations that would actually not deal with the real bottleneck, which is the wayleave process. With regards to the GIS infrastructure database, that one, it's not a problem at all, except that they raised data security and confidentiality concerns, and Icasa is able to deal with that even outside of these regulations. The standard terms and conditions regulations do give us the powers to request information from licenses that can be used for GIS mapping. We are doing it already on the mobile side, so this is not a problem. It's just for Icasa to decide on the minimum viable data sets that can be and the standard that can be used for this GIS mapping. We've already had a side follow-up meeting with the department and other interested parties to discuss how we approach this GIS infrastructure database. So that part is not a problem. The problem is in us opening up this bottleneck between licensees and the municipalities. Chair, let me pause here and invite questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mushi. Let's take the entire Icasa presentation, including the local government elections regulations. We'll take SABC and then engagements after. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. There is a municipal elections broadcast, Councillor Stolle, as part of Icasa's presentation.
Good morning, Chair, DM, and all the members of the PCC. Am I visible, Chair?
Well, you look like an angel with a lot of light behind you. But if you can't do anything about it, I think we can proceed.
Okay, I'll try to get into the darker place at a later stage, Chair. May I continue?
Continue, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I'm going to start with the background.
Sorry, rather switch off your video. It's very distracting because we cannot.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. The background of the municipal election regulations, Chair. Regulations were amended in terms of the section 56 to 59 of the Electronic Communications Act number 36 of 2005, which governs the broadcasting of the elections content and political advertisement by the broadcasters, political parties, as well as independent candidates during the election period. The other related legislations would be your Electoral Amendment 2023, your Icasa Act, as well as the Broadcasting Act of 1999. The key objective was to ensure that the public is empowered through provision of sufficient information that will assist them to make the correct decision during when they vote for the political parties or independent candidates of their choice. So the purpose of these regulations was to determine and prescribe the framework and guidelines under the political election broadcast, which we call them the PEBs, as well as the political advertisement, which we call them the PAs, which will conduct and be carried by various broadcasting service licenses, which in the next slides, I would use the abbreviations, not the actual full name. So this one, I'm just extending on the full name so that as I go with the presentation, the members of the parliament understands what are the abbreviations stands for. So the other purpose was to ensure that there is an equitable treatment of political parties and independent candidates by the broadcasting service licenses during election period. These regulations are applicable during elections period, not after, but during the period of elections, and they are applicable to broadcasters, which are our licenses, the political parties that are contesting the municipal elections, the independent candidates that are also contesting for the municipal elections. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, thanks, 𝐿, I have put the slide that brings the difference between the political advertisement as well as the political electoral broadcasting. So the PEBs, all the broadcasting service licensees who want to broadcast the PEBs will be free, while the political advertisement will be a commercial agreement between the licensee as well as the political party. The authority would not look or neither regulate what is happening between the political party as well as the individual licensee in terms of the political advertisement. But we will regulate in terms of the compliance process that would focus on how do you play your political advertisement and your PEBs according to what the regulations mandates you in terms of not playing the PEBs and PAs immediately. But in terms of the fees that would be paid by the political parties to the broadcasting licenses, the authority would not actually regulate that. However, when the licensees at a later stage, when they are requested by the authority to submit their financials or audited financials, we will be able to see that how much did the political parties pump into the licensee in terms of their political advertisement. And then the SABC has an obligation to transmit the PEBs, while the community radio stations and commercial broadcasters can elect whether they want to broadcast the PEBs and the PAs. As the same as on the other side of the political advertisement, all broadcasters can elect to broadcast the political advertisement. And then Icasa to provide duration and sequencing of PEBs. Icasa does not provide the duration and sequencing of the political advertisement. The transaction between the broadcaster and political parties and independent candidates, as I explained, that it's a commercial transaction. Broadcasters during election broadcast period not later than 48 hours before polling commences. Broadcasters broadcast during election period and not later than 48 hours before polling commences. So that means broadcasting during election broadcast period not later than 48 hours before polling commences. So earlier than that, the broadcasters would not be allowed to broadcast the broadcast elections sorry, the political election broadcast, but they are allowed to do that 48 hours before polling of elections commences. Next slide, please. So on this one, Chair, what the difference between the previous presentation that you have received with this one, I have tried to consolidate it just to give the PCC on areas of the amendments that were actually done in the regulations. So the amendments that were done on the regulation, number one was to include the independent candidates into the regulations, because the previous municipal elections of the year 2021 and 2016 did not include the independent candidates. So this one, it was crucial that we include the independent candidates, as they also contest for the municipal elections. And then we also amended Regulation 4, Sub-Regulation 7, and as it is written that it requires the political party or the independent candidates to respond within 48 hours after receiving the rejected PEB, and alter or edit the PEB and resubmit it to the broadcasting service licensee concerned, or confirm in writing that it will not resubmit the PEB. Previously, this sub-regulation, it was giving the political parties 24 hours, and that created sort of like a lot of challenges to the broadcasting service licensees to deal with this edited or neither rejected to deal with the rejected the PEB, because sometimes you might find that the PEB is sent back to the political party on a weekend, and the political party resubmit it back to the BSL same weekend, but the BSL is able to see that edited PEB on a Monday, and it causes sort of like difficulty sometimes for the BSL to broadcast that PEB, because the time slot that has been given for BSL to broadcast, sometimes you find that it's already passed. So that hence we felt that when we were doing the public hearings, some of the stakeholders, they felt that the 24 hours, it doesn't give them more time to rework on that edited PEB, as well as the BSL. Most probably it sometimes it gets challenged in terms of broadcasting that the edited PEB. Hence, the time has been extended to 48 hours. Then the regulation for sub-regulation 8 changed the words 24 hours to also 48 hours to provide sufficient time to BSL to notify the authority of a rejection of the PEB, whereby it will also furnish to the authority written reasons for the rejection. So I think this one is also clear. It is the broadcasting service licensee whereby it will submit the written reasons of why did it not broadcast the PEB, why did it reject that PEB. And then regulation for sub-regulation 12, the number of PEB slots increased from 10 time slots to 12 time slots daily, and reduced the duration from 50 seconds to 40 seconds for each PEB slot. So this one, Chair, when we were doing the public hearings, it was the suggestions of mostly the stakeholders, and if I may expand in that one, that it also came from mostly the broadcasting service licensees. The reason why the duration was reduced from 50 seconds to 40 seconds is because the PEB, while it has got also the tail disclaimer, it does not run for 50 seconds, but it has been researched that it only runs between 30 and 35 seconds. Then the other 15, then the other 15 or 10 seconds, it becomes a loss to the BSL.
Mr. Ramakumba, please mute. Councillor Sithole, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So the other 10 seconds or the 15 seconds become a loss to the BSL, while the BSL could use or utilize that 15 seconds for the other advertisements and get the income. But that particular time frame is actually a loss to a BSL. Then we agreed, based on the information that has been solicited from the BSLs, that the duration will be 40 seconds. And then the slots will increase daily from 10 to 12 slots for each BSL that will be broadcasting the PEBs. And then on regulation 4, sub-regulation 12D, BSL broadcasting a PEB should identify all PEBs through a standard pre-recorded concluding message tail with a tail disclaimer. So meaning all the PEBs should have a pre-recorded concluding message with a tail disclaimer. The low power broadcasting service licenses, those are the licenses that mostly have got a very small radius, and mostly the low power broadcasting chair, you find them in malls. They broadcast mainly in the malls for their customers or for their consumers who are in the malls. So we felt that the low power broadcasting should not broadcast the PEBs or neither the PAs, because they don't reach the constituencies, the larger constituencies, but they are only focused on the malls. So they are not going to broadcast any PEBs or any political advertisement. And then the broadcasting service licenses that intends to broadcast political advertisements must inform the authority in writing of its intention to do so within 21 working days of the publications of these regulations. We did receive all the broadcasting service licenses that would want to broadcast both the PEBs as well as the PAs, as well as those who want to broadcast both the PEBs as well as the PAs. They are on our websites. I have not gone through the entire number of how many community radio station, commercial radio station, who wants to do both the PEBs as well as the PAs. But because we have a meeting tomorrow, we would be able to identify which broadcasting service licenses that wants to broadcast both the PEBs as well as the PAs, and we have put them according to the regions or the provinces on the website, on the Icasa website. And then sub-regulation 1, it was amended from 48 hours to 5 days to allow anyone aggrieved by a political advertisement or the political election broadcast sufficient time to lodge the complaint with the SABC, the tribunal of the authority. Previously, they were allowed to lodge the complaint within a period of 48 hours, but we have seen the challenges of the 48 hours with the input that has been solicited from the stakeholders, and we agreed that within a period of 5 days, anyone who is aggrieved by the political advertisement or by the PEBs, they can lodge that complaint with the authority. Then Regulation 7, Sub-Regulation 7, amended in order to correct it as it referred to Regulation 7, Sub-Regulation 7 in the 2016 Municipal Election Regulations instead of the Regulations 6, Sub-Regulation 7. Next slide, please. Nicole, thank you. Let me see. So, Chair, the roadmap now to elections after these publications of the final amendment regulations, the authority is commencing with the compliance phase of the regulations. While the authority is still awaiting for the proclamation of the election date from the Court Minister, the authority, through compliance division, is undertaking the following processes. Number one, it's compiling list of broadcasters who will be broadcasting the PEBs and the PAs. That has been done, Chair, is already on the website. And then we are still waiting to receive a list of registered political parties and independent candidates from the IEC. We have not yet received that list of all the political parties as well as independent candidates who are contesting for the local government elections. And then we would allocate the PEB slots, as well as at the end we'll do the monitoring of the compliance according to whether the regulations are being followed. Let me pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sithole. Chair, can I invite you if you would like to make any additions, as you didn't get an opportunity at the beginning? And if you are able to, in less than 5 minutes, maybe to just reflect as well on the regulations or the proposed regulations regarding misinformation and disinformation during this election period. Councillor Ramosi?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Chair, yeah, apologies for the earlier mishap. I am back online now. Just to close up to my colleagues, thanks, Councillor Mushi and Councillor Sithole. From my side, Chair, I think as an authority, what we really wanted to demonstrate to yourself and honorable members, as I've said on the 4th of August, that the authority is working hard to ensure that we put together a sustainable plan and come up with clearly defined regulatory interventions. And what you've listened to our colleagues this morning, it's a demonstration of how we're preparing the whole issue around ensuring that come 2030, we have a clearly defined program that will accelerate connectivity in the country. Now, in the main, with the rapid deployment, honorable members, through you, Chair and DM, it's to make sure that there's transparency when it comes to provisioning of services within municipalities, because as it stands right now, the biggest risk that we see as an authority is that the NDP core mandate in ensuring that we've got universal access to villages and cities, if cooperation from municipalities is not going to attain, we are seeing this as a major barrier in unlocking connectivity, especially everywhere in this country. The issue of the intention, I think we did indicate that as an authority, our regulations are going to have an intention. We are not going to be developing based on citizens' needs, regulations that are vague, but they must have an intention to make sure that the transformation in all the sectors that we regulate. And again, is the issue of governance. I think, Chair, honorable members, the issue of governance, I think for the elections, you've heard from Councillor Sithole, is to make sure that even in the election regulations, including our rapid deployment, issues of roles and responsibilities are clearly defined in order for us to minimize issues of litigations where possible, because speed is what you need for rapid deployment. And finally, I think for the committee, we have listened to the issue around impact. You'll have noticed, Chair, that in terms of our data offerings, it's mainly to make sure that there's no discrimination between the underserved communities and those that could afford when it comes to purchasing of data or issues of data rollover and sharing. It's purely just to make sure that the value in what we regulate is protected through our regulatory interventions. And again, the issue of no discrimination when it comes to consumption of the networks in terms of what is being provided. I mean, I come from a rural village. I would want to imagine that the traffic that gets consumed in my area, there shouldn't be a deviation in ensuring that I consume the very same data that some person consume in Midrand or Cape Town. So I think our regulation should be seen within that context to say that it's purely just to level the playing field, not actually interfering with the business models. But what's going to be important, Chair and honorable members, is as and when we regulate, it's going to be very important, not just MNOs, but everyone that is licensed. When it comes to challenges of regulations, one must indicate what exactly is the challenge. Is it a challenge of the technology? Is it how one has planned the networks? Or is it a bottom line issue in terms of revenue? I think if we are transparent in how we engage, then the intention in reducing cost to communicate in this country will actually be realized, because I think that's where we need to make sure that the spectrum that gets allocated, we can see the value, because in the main, it's a natural resource, and anyone who's been assigned, we need to make sure that the services are provided to all South Africans equally, without favor and fear. And for us, is the intention that we want to see happening in South Africa. Now, with relation to the issue around misinformation, Chair, currently, as you know, we do have a forum between ourselves, the Film and Publication Board, the Information Regulator, and the Domain Authority. We have noted that, yes, indeed, there are social media platforms currently that are obviously broadcasting a lot of misinformation. But as a proactive measure, what we have done, we have engaged with the IEC in particular for now. And what we have proposed, Chair, is, and honorable members and DM, is to say that as and when you consume content from any platform, it's going to be important that your platform should be identifiable. For example, if there's a clear watermark, you might see now in my presentation, I'm using Icasa logo. Now the question is, how do you identify this is fake or exactly the brand that Icasa uses? So it's going to be important for all, even including political parties, that as and when anyone communicates, it starts with your branding. And secondly, the innovative way that we are going to do is to engage with platform owners, the meters of the world, so that it's clear that when we now advance the issue of RICA and say that anyone that has got a number, anyone that is identifiable, it's going to be important for the platform owners to validate and verify all their subscribers, because we know, Chair and honorable members, that today I can just create an account, whether I give a fake number, because I cannot be traced. We need to look at point of entry, which are actually causing this problem, so that anyone who then broadcast or post fake news can easily be traceable. But in the main, it's those that owns the platform. And that's how, as an authority, we are going to be engaging so that we minimize the risk that we see of impersonating of individuals, etc. So in a nutshell, without going into the deep, this is how I can give assurance to yourself as an oversight that we will, as a forum as well, engage even the platform owners and see how we can address the issue of misinformation. And in the main, the Department of Home Affairs, because we are now advanced in terms of RICA, just to make sure that we can trace all of us as and when we are subscribed to some of this platform. So let me stop there, Chair, but thank you for the opportunity to engage with yourself and just to give you some assurance that we are in the journey to make sure that we plan for the future and we make certain things clearer to South Africans so that whatever you consume if you are in doubt, this is the intention of our regulations going forward so that we can begin to see the impact and the relevance of what the authority does on behalf of our citizens. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the chairperson of Icasa, the councillors that presented. I think because the two issues are related, let's then take the SABC presentation and we will then come back for discussions thereafter. The gentleman who has been disturbing us the whole morning, chairperson of SABC, you're welcome. Please may you lead the SABC team in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members, DM, DG, and everybody in the platform. My apologies, I was on my phone trying to get to the office. The roads are a bit difficult to navigate this morning. Chair, the CEO will present the detailed presentation of the SABC on the preparedness for the coverage of the local government elections. However, I think for me, from an introductory note point of view, I would just want to say that we still find ourselves in a similar situation where we were when we had our last conversation, insofar as specific funding for the coverage of the election is concerned. We still don't have an indication of whether that funding will be coming through. Suffice to say that despite that fact, as the SABC, we remain committed to delivering the mandate of the election coverage for this year in question. The only challenge that we anticipate would be that because we're operating from the normal budgeting, which for news and current affairs would ordinarily be adequate to cover normal news coverage, whereas an election year like this one demands that much more scale of coverage in order to make sure that we provide that fair and equitable coverage for all political parties and you know, including independents in this regard, but also the reach to make sure that every corner of the country is actually also afforded the opportunity to be covered, so that those individuals or citizens who have to vote, they are informed of their options and so forth. So that is the main challenge. But with the resources that we have, we're committed to delivering an election coverage that aligns with the regulations that Icasa will be pronouncing, but also that aligns with the mandate that we have. Having said that, Chair, I think at this point, I will hand over to the GCO to just take you through the detailed presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, to honorable members, the Deputy Minister, Chairperson of the SABC and Icasa, to the DG and my colleagues on the line. Can I ask that I be given the rights to share?
You can go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, I'm struggling. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, let me try again. I'm just gonna. I'm unable to share the presentation.
Was it this one?
Again.
You don't have to.
I do.
You do.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you, madam.
Okay, and can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Thank you. I'm just going to now put it on full screen. Thank you so much for the opportunity for the SABC to present the state of the readiness for the election coverage. Chair, I think what's important is that the SABC, as we all know, the elections are among the most important expressions of our public service media mandate, and that it's critical for us all to understand that our responsibility goes beyond just reporting on the outcome of the election, but it's the entire ecosystem in terms of between, you know, now and the 4th of November, and obviously the outcome. And throughout this process, you mentioned earlier when you were talking to the chair of Icasa in terms of, you know, misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes, I think what is important for us is basically to ensure the credibility of the information that is going to be going out to the public. That's going to ensure that it enables our citizens to be able to participate meaningfully in this process. I'm not going to go through the table of contents. You've got the document with you. But I think what's important is that I want to start with a very clear assurance that the SABC will be covering the elections from a wall-to-wall perspective at the same level in which we do the national government elections. But you'll see with the presentation that the local government election presents us with more complexity because of the scale that is required for it. And I think it's important that that clarity is upfront, because I think the chair was just talking about where we find ourselves in terms of today from a funding perspective. But it's important to gain that understanding that we are not presenting a scenario whereby the SABC is saying that we will not be able to fund to basically fulfill our mandate. That is something that we're going to be doing. But what's important is that we need to be able to distinguish between mobilization of our resources and being finally ready for the elections themselves. Sorry, somebody's coming in and it's disturbing me. I think, Chair, from our side, a significant amount of work has already been underway in terms of us preparing. Our governance structures are active, our editorial planning is underway, and our regulatory process is proceeding, and I'll talk to it more about that because that's a critical area, and that we've already commenced in terms of orchestrating the SABC ecosystem. But I think what's important here is that the things that are time critical is that the issues, that some of the risk we face sitting in more the procurement, integration, and remediation timeline, because if it so happens that, for example, we finally get the funding that we've been asking for, and we are then able to scale according to the readiness that we require, the procurement process will prove to be a bit challenging for us, because we obviously have to follow the proper processes when it comes to supply chain. And just to talk through the governance side of it, is that our governance structure has been established, and given the significance of elections coverage, we have deliberately established a single governance chain, which is very important for us. At an institutional level, the board exercises its oversight over the entire election system. And while I, together with EXCO, remain accountable for the operational and the organizational readiness of SABC for the elections, we have an operating model that is anchored by an active election steering committee, where we've got executive sponsors from both the news side and the technology side, which is then supported by the program office and the operational governance forum. And in this, we have basically different work streams that fit into and feed into this process that really makes it into the single enterprise process. And what's important here is that everything is just working in that ecosystem from an assurance perspective. And just to go into in terms of the core, it's important for me to say the core of the elections, which is basically the editorial side, the news coverage side, ensuring that the coverage is in every language and it reaches every South African. That is something that for us is very critical as we plan this. So these are things that we regard as non-negotiable from an SABC perspective. If you look at it from an accuracy, fairness, and impartiality, those are non-negotiable. And that essential voter information that we've already been doing. If you look at the fact that last week we come from, the voter registration weekend, and SABC plays a very important role in ensuring that citizens are informed, and those obligations are protected throughout. And then if we look at in terms of the coverage and scale side of it, the reality is that this model that we're looking at, Chair, is very much budget aligned, and it can be scaled up or scaled down, which is very important. So basically, in terms of deployment, what is going to be happening is that it's going to depend on the purse that we're going to be receiving. So if you look at the volume of live coverage, of regional coverage that we can support as the SABC, because unlike, for example, the national government elections, the difference with local elections is that we literally need teams at a municipal level because that's the, that's the granularity of what we have to do, and that requires specialist support, which includes production capability, digital and data services, infrastructure and logistics. So that's the most important part in terms of the complexity that is presented for this one. But I think what's important on this side, we're saying that from a management perspective, is that we've actually planned the detail of this, and we are able to scale it up and scale it down. And then looking at just the integrity of the elections, and I think it also speaks to us being able to protect the integrity of the democratic process. We have policies that the SABC has developed that really guide us from an election perspective. If you start looking at, for example, our editorial policies that currently exist. But what we are saying, Chair and honorable members, is that policies alone in terms of being on paper is not sufficient, which means that there's a massive role that we play in terms of people training and ensuring compliance of the elections. It means that our people as the SABC must understand the rules and must be able to translate them into standard operating procedures and ensure that the controls are into place and applied consistently across the SABC. And that covers everything from editorial judgment to fairness to plurality and proportionality. And it's something that Icasa, looks at and ensures that how is the SABC then covering all political parties from a proportional perspective, which then goes back to the scale that I was speaking to earlier in my presentation, and that we must demonstrate then that compliance throughout. And I think what's important here, as part of the proportionality, what the chair of Icasa was talking to was, for example, it also includes things like the party election broadcast, where the SABC, in fact, we are the only ones who are obligated to carry the party election broadcast. And that also speaks to, then we go out in terms of our commercial activities where we look at political advertising. This is when our commercial teams go out and really advertise the SABC platforms from an ecosystem perspective, everything from radio to TV to digital platforms, making it available for political advertising. But we do similarly, by the way, for party election broadcasts, and also ensuring that we adhere to those Icasa regulations during this process, which includes, Chair, things like, when is the quiet period just before the voting, ensuring that we don't have political advertising taking place, for example, on the day of the voting. So these are the things that we actually have to ensure that we implement, and that our teams are aware of just the compliance requirements for this period. And I think also what's important, there's also this dimension that is critical and has become increasingly important, not just from a South African perspective, but we've seen it globally as well in terms of election cycle, which is misinformation, deepfakes, and manipulated content that tends to actually be deployed during this period. So the SABC has strengthened our ability to verify material before it is amplified on our platforms. And this is important in terms of elections integrity. So our quality system, our verification processes play a very critical role. And Chair, it's not just during an election period that we do that, but it's throughout. But what I'm saying here is that more so than ever during an election period, we have to be more vigilant because we know that there's opportunism that takes place. So for compliance, for us, it's something that is important, and that we know that it is audited also after the election, because we do publish our post-election coverage, and therefore it has to be embedded in our operating policy for the elections. This slide really gives us an indication of our readiness, and I think I've spoken to it. And I think what's important here is just genuinely the relationship that we have with the IEC as we prepare. So we do have an agreement with them, and there's been ongoing engagements with the IEC where we've started discussing the result operation centers. And the difference with the national election is that obviously we know that there's one central rock in the national elections, but in provincial elections, we literally have the operation center from a regional perspective. And then what's also important is that results integration. We are talking to the CSIR, which we did in the national government elections, where we really have to have granular, credible data that we are utilizing from our reporting perspective. We've also concluded the advertising services agreement with the IEC. I think what's important is that with the IEC, we have what I'm calling an overarching umbrella agreement between our two parties, and this one exists and will be enforced until the 31st of December 2028. It was also, enforced in the previous national government elections. So what we've done is that we've simply put addendums in place to accommodate us for the requirements of the national, the local government elections. So we are carrying on with our engagements in terms of the teams on the IE side. And we are really far down the line in terms of ensuring that our regional mobilization is taking place. And also importantly, from an SABC perspective, our regulatory preparation is ongoing to ensure that from a governance perspective, we meet the requirements of the IEC. And then if we look at the funding capability, I've previously presented to yourselves regarding that 120 million rand purse that we require to enable us to plan and to scale accordingly. But I think what you're seeing in front of me in this slide, what it really does is that it really tells you what the 120 million would be funding. It's everything from our editorial operations to basically our ROC and technology requirements. So it's really an ecosystem approach, including our results, data and digital capability, and our operational support. So that's basically the additional requirement that the SABC is asking for, so that we can just be able to scale up. And then really this will determine the extensiveness of our operational deployment and the depth of our coverage, because we know that multilingual broadcasting is an expensive exercise, but also the technical capabilities that are required for the elections. We have previously spoken about the fact that we are at risk when it comes to our resilience, because our technology has reached and has passed end of life, and therefore we need to really guard against our level of redundancy and that resilience that we have to build into our operations. Therefore, I think the uncertainty now is really whether we are able to receive that funding on time. We are literally sitting at 3 months before the elections themselves, so the time is very tight. And here it just shows you in terms of the late funding. I know that you've received this presentation and therefore you've read this. So for us, we are saying here that the timeline matters enormously, because we've got between August and really November for us to source, deliver, and mobilize and integrate the technology requirements that we've got. And what we are saying is that the reality is that even though we sit with this risk, but in terms of how we've planned, is that we are able to scale up and scale down and be able to ensure that from an operational perspective, the mandate is not sacrificed or compromised in any way. This really talks to the coverage and our readiness, and our governance structures, like I said, have been established. And this basically says that we will be able to deliver, Chair, on the requirements of the elections on the 4th of November. And in terms of just the risk that we look at, they do remain still controlled, but we are saying that from a resourcing perspective and a deployment perspective, that is something that's going to really impact on SABC's ability. So in summary, Chair, we understand the importance and the significance of the responsibility that is placed upon us, that is entrusted to the SABC during the elections, and our commitment is to ensure that all South Africans, wherever they live, whichever SABC platform they rely on, which is radio and SABC Plus, or from a multi-platform perspective, they have access to credible information, and that they are able to access election information and are able then to go out and vote in the numbers that are required. I think what's important for this meeting, what we are asking the committee is basically the continuation of the support in ensuring that we are able to access the additional budget that is required to scale up. And we really want to express our appreciation of the support that we continue to receive, and that we are scaling up and ensuring that South Africa is election ready from a public service media perspective. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you to the chairperson of the SABC, colleagues from Icasa and the department. Honorable members, those then are the two presentations. Icasa dealt with rapid deployment, the end user, and so you and I lay your data expiry issues, the municipal elections, and touch a little bit on misinformation, and then the SABC on their state of readiness. I would like us to open now for discussions and engagements with the two presentations, maybe just to double check that Councillor Sithole is aware that the election has been proclaimed. It was proclaimed on the 7th of August. I'm not sure if the presentation is outdated and what impact that has on what was presented to us with regards to that. I suppose it just kickstarts then those processes. Honorable members, can I then call for hands for engagement on these two presentations? I am looking for hands. I'm not seeing any hands. Was it crystal clear? Nobody wants to engage it? Okay, Honorable Mkhakha, you will be first, followed by Honorable Elisha, and then Honorable Subrathi, Honorable Bodlane, Honorable Shongwe. If we can start with you, Honorable Mkhakha.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Morning, honorable members, our colleagues in the platform, and everybody in the platform. Deputy Minister, I'm not sure what our minister is in, but everybody in the platform. Chair, just a couple of clarities from my side. One is in relation to data, a transfer of data. The presenter indicated that they've just received court papers challenging their approach. And the motivation is that the network is alleging that the Icasa might be introducing secondary sector. And I just want to check whether that is a fact, a statement of fact, or an assumption. And surely you must elaborate as to why this allegation. The second issue is in relation to the rollover data, which for me is appreciated. But you are recommending the opt-in to be charged. And I'm sure you are doing that in the interest of the customers or beneficiaries. Okay, can you elaborate on this opt-in arrangement? Whether this opt-in will not have an impact, a negative impact to the customers or beneficiaries at this stage. The third issue is in relation to elections, which for me is one critical issue. You are indicating that Icasa does not have a scope over local government. And I'm sure it's a shortfall in terms of the legislative framework. It might not be your responsibility. But my understanding is that Icasa is a regulator for the entire country across sectors. Now, you are indicating that it cannot regulate local government. And the question is why? Well, that talks to the scope of Icasa, whether Icasa It's just an assumption that Icasa is a regulator for the country and there are excluded sectors or phase or tiers of government. But why that will only focus to election in terms of covering local government? Beyond that, Icasa does not have a scope of dealing with this. I think that's a clarity that one needs at that level, because it means this portfolio committee might have a responsibility to ensure that we close this gap if there's such a gap, as I identified now. The last one, Chair, is in relation to the slots allocated to your service providers. Do you include community radios in terms of these allocations that seem to be strictly for political parties? Because political parties, if there's a local radio in my community, yeah, I simply go to that office and say, look, I would want to be covered. But there seem to be regulations now that controls that. We do not make it difficult for political parties to actually engage the closest institutions in their localities, like your community radio, in terms of this. Or you do have that flexibility of allowing them to take their own decisions to actually assist political parties. I'm worried about this question of independence, and I know that it's not your fault. It's just a question of IEC, and we're not discussing IEC here. The capacity for you to manage, but it's easier to manage political parties, but independents are increasing on a daily basis. Do you have that capacity to manage in terms of your provision, all independents in this country, or do you have a particular framework for independent, for independence that I might not know now as to exactly what is it? But my worry is around the capacity to manage independence. Because instead of reducing independence, I could say that your frameworks are encouraging. Of course, it might be era of democracy. Because politically, we don't need more independence. We don't need more political parties. I hear that there are 620 political parties this time. But we don't need such many political parties. And if our framework should ensure that we begin to discourage people who are running away from political parties to establish their own individual kind of thing. But that's not your fault. It's not a fault, but my worry is a question of capacity. How do you going to manage these independents in terms of their basic needs as far as elections are concerned? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkhaga. We'll take Honorable Elisha, followed by Honorable Subrathi. Go to the entities for responses and then come back with Honorable Bodlani and the other members. Honorable Elisha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to you and the colleagues on the call. Chair, I'm very concerned if SABC were to go to elections without the budget that they say they require. And my concern is that there will be favoritism. And I say this because an example is that this past weekend, EFF held women's events, in all corners of South Africa on Sunday, but none of them were covered by SABC, and it's not like we didn't make a request. Gauteng alone, we had 3 events in the metros, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Johannesburg, but none of those were covered. And of course, they're going to take or prioritize government, because they did cover the government events. But this is the same SABC when March and March was doing their marches, in all corners of South Africa the other time. They had resources to deploy to those marches. So I don't know what informs their editorial decisions, but it is concerning, and I'm very uncomfortable if we were to go to elections without them having particularly the budget that they require, because we're going to fight with them, because those instances are going to repeat themselves and we're not going to get coverage, and it's going to be a crisis for a lot of us. And moving to Icasa, chairperson, is that, the regulations say 60% of slots are shared equally and 40% are based on how many candidates a party has or seats they already hold. What does this mean? Does it mean that now, does it not give advantage to parties that already are in power or have got more seats and representation? I just need clarity on that. What do they mean when they say 60% of slots is shared equally and then 40% is based on other things? I hear that the presenter was telling us that they reduced the PEB's time to 40 seconds. I'm wondering if this isn't making it harder for political parties to explain their message to the voters. But she does say it is informed by, how the ads are usually 35 seconds, 30 to 35 seconds. But maybe she can clarify if the disclaimer is not eating in those seconds, because they do need to have a disclaimer. So if we maybe can get clarity that in that 40 seconds, the disclaimer is included there and it's not eating in the 40-second slot that they giving us. And maybe, Chair, I'm wondering if the broadcaster can refuse to air our PEB just because they don't like our message. And I say this because, we've had our ad as the EFF removed before. And I just want, clarity on that, because the regulations say that you can't broadcast content that incites violence or advocates hatred. But who decides what counts as incitement, because sometimes it can be radicalism and then the other person is interpreting it, differently. I'm concerned because this maybe could be something that can be used to silence, legitimate political criticism. So I just want to know who decides, or what counts as incitement of violence or something that advocates for hatred. So another one, Chair, is that if someone complains about, one's PEB, how quickly will Icasa make a decision in that regard, particularly during elections? I ask because I think 5 days can be too long. So would it be possible for Icasa to handle the complaints with urgency and urgently, so that the parties do get the decision? And another one, Chair, if the broadcaster refuses to air, let's say, one's PEB, can they be taken to Icasa immediately, or do we have to wait 5 days? I just want clarity on how that goes. So I don't know if I understood it correctly that SABC wants commercial channels like SABC3 and Metro FM to be exempted from broadcasting PEBs. Why? Why is that? And won't this mean that, the people who listen to these stations or watch, this particular TV station will miss out on the important political, information that we want to send to them, because there are people who would be committed or listen to just Metro FM. So if you're saying that you want to exempt, certain stations and TV platforms, would that not affect the people that we want to talk to and having people missing out on the important information? And why is it that community radio stations and low power stations are not allowed to broadcast PEBs? Because we've got a lot of rural, people who only have access to these stations because you miss the frequency in these rural areas before, and they are committed and listen to community radio stations. So why are community radio stations not allowed to broadcast PEBs? Maybe if that can be explained. And maybe, Chair, can they just tell us that for the submission of PEBs, I think they do say that political parties have to submit their PEBs 5 days before broadcast. But for instance, worst case scenario, like the chair of Icasa now had a power cut. Let's say something happens, like a power cut situation happens. Do those people, and then it prevents, a party to submit on time. Do those people get extension or what happens? And maybe they can tell us, how do we submit the PEB, the PEBs? Do political parties need to submit them physically, or we're doing, electronic copies now? And as I conclude, Chair, what happens to the PEB slots that are not used? Let's say, if a broadcaster misses a schedule of a PEB, what happens? Do you get a new slot or what? Also, if the unused PEB slots, what happens to the unused PEB slots? Can they be given like to other parties, or do they just go to waste? And maybe the last one, Chair. So I know that the PEB and the PA, they need to be different. But what does this mean? Does it mean the contents of the ad or the one just needs to have a disclaimer? I think I just need clarity on that, because I know that the PB and the PA cannot be the same, but what does that mean? Could it be like the contents of the ad needs to be completely different, or what? Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll end it there.
Thank you, Madam. Honorable Subrati, your hand is down. I'm not sure if you still want to come in.
Yes, Chair. Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning again to yourself and to all colleagues on the call. And let me welcome a very timely presentation covering mainly the local government elections, both by the authority and by SABC. Chair, let me maybe begin echoing and aligning myself with the concerns that Honorable Felicia had raised when she began her engagement around the ability of SABC to be able to sufficiently cover and the concerns raised surrounding funding. And maybe my first question there would be is, how can this committee support the SABC to ensure that they receive the funding, and so that South Africans are able to get full coverage by the public broadcaster? So I think for me, that would be the first question. How and what can we do to support that process? If the full amount, and again around funding, if the full amount is then not approved or doesn't come through, what comes out of the plan first? We heard CEO saying that this plan can be scaled, is designed so that it can be scaled up. But if the full amount is not solicited and doesn't come through, what comes out of the plan first? Maybe give us an indication which provinces get affected, which municipalities could be affected by insufficient funding. Surrounding preparation with SABC, your presenters, etc., what is the level of training that's going in now to ensure that presenters and anchors are sufficiently skilled and able to manage the coverage with the necessary within the necessary mandate and within the necessary regulations? Testing, rehearsal, and fallback are shown as not yet accepted. Maybe the question then is, when are the rehearsals scheduled, and what happens if a system fails at that point? So moving on to Chair, the PA. With regards to the PA, maybe my question there would be, will there be any monitoring and regulations to guard against anti-competitive behavior by political parties in the PA allocation, on top of measures that already exist. I want to talk to a question, Chair, which I think has maybe been a huge painful part for us, for all South Africans. And this is on the PA allocations. You know, we as a country collectively feel displeased at witnessing our patriotic symbol being burnt to ashes, being burnt and turned to ashes now. It was to everyone's displeasure to see that such a sacred symbol being desecrated on national television, and all in an attempt to garner votes at the expense of our patriotic symbol. My question around the chair is, are there sufficient measures in place, both by Icasa and the SABC, to ensure that such an act never happens again? What recourse measures for takedown and public comment considerations are in place to ensure that the public can raise concerns and that PA and even PEBs are not against public morals? And on the question of proportionality, Chairperson, on the question of proportionality, my question on that is, on proportionality placements on PEBs, there is a concern regarding the application of a subjective test. As Icasa puts it, there has to be a test. The question then is, what measures are put in place to ensure that there is fairness applied throughout the determination of PEB allocations? Chair, an additional question on the issue surrounding, around the amendments to municipal public. So the regulations were published on the 2nd of April, and those intending to broadcast at 21 days to notify the authority. My question around that is, how many notifications were received? And what happens to those who did not notify in time? Now, the PEB slots can only be allocated once candidate registration has closed. By what date will the authority finalize the allocation and the sequence of slots? My additional question is, the maximum penalty for non-compliance by a broadcasting service licensee is 1 million rand. How many fines have been imposed under the previous municipal election regulations? Now, the regulations requires that the public broadcaster to carry 12 political election broadcast slots a day free of charge. Did the authority assess what that obligation would cost SABC before finalizing this amendment? The authority, Icasa envisages completing the rapid deployment regulations by the 31st of December this year. Now, is that date firm? And what still has to be done before publication? And maybe my last question is, the Icasa regulations do not deal with manipulated or synthetic political advertising. Now, if such an advertisement is submitted for broadcast, on what basis is it refused and who carries that risk? Thank you so much, Chairperson. Those will be my questions at this point.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Subrathi. Honorable members, can I check with you if you are okay with the suggestion that we give the entities an opportunity to respond and we come back for another round? We do have time. My worry is that this is clearly a very hot topic and there are lots of questions being fired from all of the members. Would that be acceptable to the meeting? Okay, silence means consent.
It's okay, it's okay. Chair.
It's on, Chair. It's Honorable 𝐬𝐻𝐭.
Yes,
I'd like to formally remove my hand. I've been covered by Honorable 𝐶𝐨𝐵𝐿𝐶 and Subrathi on my questions. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Honorable Shongwe, and welcome back. Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
Felicia, yes, your fave. Chair, I just want to add one. I just want to know from Icasa, when are they going to announce the slots? Just that, Chair. Maybe as they respond to our question, when will the time slot be announced?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let me then hand over to, should I say, the department for the entities to come in with the responses. And also the department did not make any reflections on the 120 million the SABC spoke about. So if they could just also answer that, DG.
Thank you very much. I'm not so sure if perhaps the DM would like to come in first before I proceed.
I think thank you, Honorable Chair. I think DG will deal with the matter, but the issue of funding SABC for election remains not just a strong concern, but an urgent concern. Of course, it's a matter we're engaging Treasury with, but the problem is that is the time at our disposal. My view is that we require as many voices as possible in this regard. But let DG go and elaborate. Thanks, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much to the DM. In terms of last week's engagement, honorable members, we did receive the request from the SABC part of the submission. Pardon me, it must be the cold. Relates to the elections. A submission of the Treasury memo, as we had the window period for the application under the unforeseen and unavoidable, was submitted to the Office of the Minister. However, it was felt that there wasn't strong enough motivation for that. The matter is still, as the DM indicated, for us still to engage Treasury. I think as indicated in the presentation by the SABC, the funding itself in terms of the requirements was indicated, and we would therefore still need to engage both internally in the department with the Office of the Minister as well as Treasury for the funding requirements for the elections, Chair. But the SABC did submit last week the request.
Thank you very much. Can we move then to the SABC, and you'll be followed by Icasa?
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the issues that have been put forward are in the editorial space, so I will allow the CEO to deal with them. And maybe also just request, Chair, if you allow, that at the end, you just allow us to introduce our new CFO who have just joined us at the SABC. Thank you, Chair. CEO, you may proceed.
CEO, I'm not sure if you're talking, but we cannot hear anything on the side.
Chair, if the CEO is struggling that side, let me try to, in the meantime, tackle some of the questions that I think I can speak to. Maybe let me start with the question of the funding. Honorable Suprathi asked what help can be given. I think I am aligned with the DM that I think more voices as possible in the engagements with Treasury can be helpful, and I think if the committee can continue to add its voice there, that can assist. Also, the issues around the what falls off if not the full amount is given. Of course, as I indicated, and also as the CEO has indicated, the commitment for us is to ensure that we cover the elections in a manner that ensures that equity across the length and breadth of the country, and making sure that all political parties and the independents that will be contesting the elections get their fair share of coverage. But as it relates to coverage, it is highly likely that the rural areas are likely to suffer, because if I just make a comparison, covering an election in Gauteng and compared to covering an election in the Eastern Cape or Limpopo, 𝐶𝐶𝐻, it's much more easier to cover an election in Gauteng because of the size of the province, the consolidation, but also the easiness of access by our journalists to actually can go and cover an event and go back to sleep at their home. Whereas if you are in Limpopo or Eastern Cape, the distances that sometimes have to be traveled would require that that journalist must be provided with a vehicle, that journalist must be provided with accommodation, 𝐶𝐶𝐻. So with limited funding, those are the areas that are likely to get hit the most. But that's not a very scientific answer, as the stage will obviously, depending on how much funding does come through, if any, it does come through, we'll have to apply our minds in making sure that we do not compromise the mandate, as it were, and the question of equity and fairness and impartiality, as it were. Then on the question around the training and rehearsals, I can assure the committee that the planning for the local government elections have already started within the SABC, and the work is underway and to continue to go on until we get to the election, and we conclude also the announcement of the results. The question of equitability on political advertisement, this is a tricky one for us as the SABC, in the sense that that's a commercial transaction. And as we've been continuing to say to the committee over a long period of time, we are destitute insofar as our financial position is concerned. So it will be difficult for us when we're making a commercial decision to say that, as an example, the EFF is buying more slots than everybody else, as to get to a point where we say, no, we'll reject the business of the EFF. It will be difficult to do that, because that's a commercial question. If we reject that, it has implications for us from a financial sustainability point of view. But on the PEBs, the commitment is that the schedule as provided for will be honored to its logical conclusion, as it were. And then the issue of the banning of national symbols, and I think Honorable Subrathi here was making reference to the DA advert in the last election. So of course, this is proving to be quite a slippery slope for us, because we apply and interpret the regulations that are put forward by Icasa to the best of our ability. And in this case in question, our own assessment was that the advert in its form, in the form that it was when it was submitted to us, crossed the boundaries. And then we requested the political party to make adjustment to it. As you would know, that matter ended up within Icasa, the matter being taken there, and we lost that case, and we actually fined 500,000 for that case. So it's one space that we will. I think our commitment will be that we will continue to interpret the regulations to the best of our abilities and take decisions that we think are sound, or that we believe are sound and can be justified within the confines of the regulations. But of course, sometimes it would happen that were found to have gotten it wrong by Icasa, as was the case with the burning of the flag, the advert with the burning of the flag. So it's a difficult space, I think, which is somewhat subjective, I would think, because we were convinced at the time that our decision was correct. And then maybe let me end by speaking to some of the issues that were raised by Honorable 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, just to indicate that I think the one commitment that one would make around the issue of concerns of maybe favoritism and so forth along the lines of if the funding does not come through, therefore the SABC might favor certain parties over others. We want to recommit ourselves to that equitability, fairness, impartiality, and doing our work without favor or fear, and want to assure Honorable 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 and all South Africans that we will ensure that we provide equitable coverage that ensures that South African citizens are empowered to make the choices that they must make come the 4th of November. Thank you very much, Chair. I hope I've covered the questions, all questions that were put forward to us. If I've missed anything, I will take it, and I see that the CEO is also back online. Maybe I can hand over to her before I take it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, before you do that, can we just take the DM? I think he wants to make an intervention, then the CEO can come.
Well, thanks, Honorable Chair. Maybe it's something I left out, which I thought I should throw it in this platform. How the issue of, this is the general statement, and I don't think I have a solution, but all I'm saying, I find it, because I don't want to enter the case of SABC with a political party, but I'm not sure how the issue, the dispute on the flag is going to be handled. And I'm not sure if the committee is a matter it ever looked at and actually...
Point of order, Chair.
There's a point of order. DM, if we could listen to the point of order.
I'm sorry, Chair, I'm leaving my camera off because the lighting is bad in the room I am. Chair, I think Honorable Subrathi raised the issue of the burning of the flag, which happened in a previous election. It is not a live matter for discussion at this point. And I think the answer that the SABC chair provided puts the matter to rest. I don't know if it helps us to be having a conversation about that at this point. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bodlani. It's difficult for me to rule on the point of order because we hadn't yet heard what the DM was going to say. But DM, I think maybe guided by what Honorable Bodlani is saying, I suppose we are not debating that particular issue, but I would assume you are speaking on principles, which is Honorable Subrathi's question, how such matters get handled moving forward. Am I correct in my interpretation?
As well, in the context of Honorable Bodlani's point, I just leave that question mark and I don't want to proceed. All right.
All right.
But it remains an important question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DM. CEO, let's take you so we can move to Icasa.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me this time around. I just wanted to talk to the issue of the exemption that we've applied for in terms of PEBs, that the commercial platforms be excluded. We have submitted the application and we are still waiting for a response. We submitted the application during the regulation review, so we're still waiting for a response. Then the other issue I just wanted to get into, I think the chair did cover it to a certain extent, is that from a training perspective, the training is ongoing. We've started it, and we are basically having different workshops that cover different arrays of key issues and key themes from an election perspective. And we are doing the training as well in partnership with SANEF and the IEC. So that's a very critical one for us. And from an adverts perspective, the SABC sticks to in terms of constitutional values. And on our side, when deciding, when we get the submissions for election adverts, we have an internal, and I spoke to the governance earlier, we have a governance committee that basically reviews these adverts and then gives feedback to the different political parties in terms of whether they honor in terms of our editorial policy and, and that they hold master against our constitution. So that's basically how we look at it. And I think those were the two I just wanted to talk to. So we have a strict editorial system, and we ensure that there's no bias that comes into that decision making. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, CEO. Can we then move to Icasa on the questions that had been posed by members?
Thank you, Chair. Let me take the end user and rapid deployment questions. The first question was whether it's fact that there could be a secondary market from the new rules. And our response is that the MNOs did not present to Icasa any evidence proving that this is fact. And until they do so, Icasa is then not able to really rule on it. And just to explain how they say this would happen is on the basis that someone buys 100 gigs of data, as I explained earlier, and they resell it into smaller units. And they're arguing that the 100 gig would have been discounted and therefore reselling it at a higher value than is unauthorized. But there is nothing illegal about it, as far as we understand. The analogy is that if you bought a bag of potatoes at 100 rands, and that was the value that it was sold for, and you resell it in smaller packs, what is the harm? And that is the question that must then be answered by the MNOs for Icasa to have a better understanding of this problem. We do not even anticipate that would be the case. Our anticipation is that the 100 gig would be transferred to friends, family. And if it is that they are able to trace and track the trend wherein the 100 gig gets, it's bought more than once a month, and it gets transferred to different numbers, and they can submit that evidence to Icasa, then we've got a case that we can work on. But for now, we leave it at that we don't know how this data transfer would be of any harm. Then the second point was on clarity as well on the opt-in. The opt-in means that when you run out of your bundle, whether it's airtime, SMS, or bundles or data, the default is that the operators would continue to bill you. You would continue to have services, but they will be charging you higher rates compared to the rate you were being charged when you are still within the bundle. Now, what has happened is that then you're not aware that you've run out of your bundle and you're now being charged out of bundle. And in most cases, you should have had a spend limit, but you find that there is even no spend limit to cut off how much they can charge you out of bundle. And that has led to bill shock. Now, changing that to say, when you run out of your bundle, your services must stop and you must recharge, unless if you opt in. Opting in meaning you then say, sign in with the operator to say, when I run out of my bundle, do charge me out of bundle rates, and maybe at a limit of 500 rands, and don't exceed that, because we still want it to be a decision of the user, how much they are willing to spend out of bundle rates. Otherwise, give them an option to hit a hard stop and recharge. And the last question on the, okay, two more last questions on rapid deployment, is that Icasa is given powers to regulate in as far as it is for the deployment of electronic communications. When we say we do not have powers to regulate municipalities, it's because municipalities, they've got their own local government powers and bylaws which fall under their competence. And same as that, they do not regulate electronic communications. We also do not regulate their processes and procedures with regards to how they put rules around way leaves and charges. So that is the distinction. So Icasa cannot instruct municipalities to say you shall give way leave within 30 days. And similarly, way leaves cannot say only fiber will be put on this road. So it's that distinction that we are clarifying. And with regards to the final date, yes, our plan is to have the final regulations by the 31st of December. What still needs to be done is we've gone through the written representations, oral presentations, and afforded stakeholders another 14 days, which ends this Friday, to submit supplementaries, arguments or motivations for what they presented based on the questions that came out of the discussions. We're then going to analyze those questions, those responses, and finalize the regulations and the reasons document. That is what takes us to the 31st of December. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else from Icasa?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, boy.
Okay. Should I respond or?
Yes, please do respond.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I'm going to start with the last question that Honorable Felicia raised on when are we going to be able to allocate the slots? So, Chair, the slots at the current format or at this current moment, we cannot allocate them because we are still waiting to receive from the IEC a list of the contesting political parties, as well as the independent candidates. Once we have received that list, we will notify and invite political parties and as well as the broadcasting service licensee accordingly, so that we go on a draw. So the other question, why are we not allocating the PEBs to the community radio stations? So the community radio stations will also broadcast the PEBs, but that would not be all the community radio stations, considering that the PEBs are free slots. So those who want to broadcast the PEBs have submitted their information and their contact persons to the authority, as I had said it earlier in the presentation, to say we have published that information according to the provinces, that who would broadcast the PEBs only according to those provinces, who would broadcast the political advertisements, and who would broadcast both the political advertisements as well as the PEBs, the party election broadcast. Then I think regarding the low power, as I said, that the low power, those are radio stations, small BSL that mainly broadcast in the malls. They don't reach the broader mass in terms of communicating through the message. It's when you are at the mall at that particular time, and then you are able to hear what is being broadcasted. So seeing that the low power radios or low power licenses target very, very small areas like mall, we then excluded it from the election regulations. Then there was another question which says, I think the issue of reporting if there is a complaint, if one wants to lodge a complaint. And then we did mention that it will take about 5 days, or you can lodge your complaint within a period of 5 days. However, each case, it comes out with its own merit. And at times, you would not get immediately the response because as I say, that each case comes with its own merit. Some of the cases or some of the BSL would want to involve the lawyers to represent them at the CCC. And that also delays the process of concluding the hearings because some of the lawyers at that particular time are not present. Hence, it is difficult for those cases to be concluded immediately. Then, if broadcast refuse to broadcast the PEB, so in the regulation, we did mention that where the BSL has rejected a PEB, and the political party or independent candidate concerned has confirmed in writing to the BSL that it will not resubmit the PEB, then the licensee must, within a period of 48 hours, notify the authority of such rejection, and must also give the authority the reasons, written reasons for the rejection of that PEB. The BSL, which is your licensee, it cannot decide on its own that they would not broadcast the PEB. They must communicate directly with the licensee that they are not going to broadcast the PEB and state the reason why. If that PEB needs to be edited, then the political party or the independent candidate that has submitted the PEB should edit if possible. But if they see that they don't want to edit that particular PEB, then the licensee must inform the authority within that period of 48 hours. Sorry, I nearly said 48 days, 48 hours. Then I think there was also a question that included the 40 seconds, whether the PEB does the PEB with a tail disclaimer broadcast, when the broadcast is done, should it be within the 40 seconds? Yes, it should be the 40 seconds. That PEB, including the tail disclaimer, should be within that 40 seconds, but it cannot exceed the 40 second. And then, as well as the difference between the political advertisement and the PEB, indeed, there should be a difference between the political advertisement and the PEB. The PEB cannot be the same as your advertisement. Your political advertisement would be more on persuasive, but the content as well should differ. It shouldn't look the same as your party election broadcast. I think the community radio station, I did touch on it. I did touch on the issue of when the BSL doesn't want to broadcast. I don't know whether I left something behind.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair. If I have left something, may I be reminded, please, if I didn't touch some of the questions that have been raised. Thank you, Chair.
We'll come back to that and we'll give members an opportunity to follow up as well. Let me take the hands, and can I ask that Councillor Sithole and all other participants, please try and fix the video issue so that when you come back, we can engage with you. I had Honorable Bodlani, Honorable Nchabeleng, Honorable Chauke Adonis. Can I then start with you, Honorable Bodlani?
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm sorry, Chair, I did say I've got downlights in the room that I am in, so the video is really bad. Chair, thank you so much. As Honorable Subrathi says, this really is a timely conversation, but it would have also helped us to have had this conversation much earlier. So, Chair, I think for me, it's more clarity seeking than anything. And I do apologize that my questions will sound like they are all over the place because of the replies that we have received in between. But Chair, I want to say on the issue of the data expiry, the more you listen to Icasa and our engagements with the mobile network operators, it really does feel like two ships passing in the night. And I do appreciate that the matter is in front of court and very little could be said on this. But it would also help us, I thought it would have helped me to just get an explanation of some sort, because as you would know, we've got very little oversight. In fact, we've got no legislative oversight over the mobile network operators. However, we do have over Icasa. Some explanation of, simple explanation that is, of what this court case is about. I almost started thinking, you know, when the elephants fight, it is the grass that gets ahead. And in this instance, it would be the consumers who are then left in limbo. In that same breath, Chairperson, I think I would love to also make an intervention for us as a portfolio committee to say, us engaging on this data expiry conversation at this level does not necessarily empower us. Is it at all possible for us to have, I beg your pardon, some sort of engagement outside the portfolio committee where we are really taken through on this? It does not necessarily have to be from Icasa, perhaps from the supporting staff. I think that would help us greatly, because at the end of the day, while there's political considerations about this, the reality is that there's also an issue of facts that we need to really speak to when we speak about the data expiry issue. Chair, I am quite concerned about what Councillor Mushi was saying about what she calls observations of collision between the mobile network operators. And I do appreciate, and I even have observations in inverted commas even on my notes, but it is serious. And if we are going to have such observations by Icasa on the mobile network operators, but we do not hear what interventions are being made, then it renders Icasa toothless. Maybe the question should then be, based on those observations, what interventions has Icasa made? And Chair, I think we are not having elections for the first time in South Africa. Icasa has been a regulator over the years. Based on what they have seen, what they have learned over the previous elections, what do they anticipate to be the biggest challenge, and how ready are they to remedy that? And I want to tie that, Chairperson, with the facts that are before us, that we know as the Portfolio Committee, we've got tenures of the councillors expiring between the 31st of October and the 30th of November. I know I have asked the issue of capacity of Icasa previously, but I want to ask it in the context of Icasa being able to run and I say run, you know what I mean, to run the elections with the phasing out or the impending end of contracts of the councillors. How are they going to balance that? I think that would also help me. Chair, I also worry about the low power licensees. And I think based on what Honorable 𝐶𝐿isha was saying, it feels like they are going to be falling off the cracks. And also on the explanation that Councillor Sithole was giving. So perhaps maybe what the question becomes is, while I appreciate that they don't reach many audiences, but they are open to abuse if they are left unregulated. What is the rationale? Is it an issue of cost that Icasa feels that if they are excluded from the regulation, then it somewhat helps Icasa with the cost? And I do appreciate the issue of audience reach, but that cannot be the only consideration, especially if they operate from public spaces like your malls. That really leaves room for abuse. And Chair, you have spoken to the issue of the proclamation of the local government election by Dr. Minister. I remember previously, Chairperson, Icasa would then be engaging with the political parties. How is that going to happen? And what other engagements is Icasa going to be having with the relevant stakeholders that we could also play oversight over, so that we also have a broader understanding of how Icasa positions itself with the elections, and are they happy with the engagement so far? Thank you. And then on the SABC, Chair, with everything said about how the SABC is positioning themselves for the local government elections, I worry about two things. That the quality of the reporting by the SABC is going to be compromised. And that would mean that, secondly, SABC, I beg your pardon, loses credibility. And the consequence of that is a loss of viewers. And Chair, maybe some clarity from the portfolio side. We had written to the Minister of Finance, the National Treasury, requesting some clarity on the allocation of funds for the SABC. This was a few months back. Did we receive a reply? And what was that reply? And Chair, I did not get I missed where the SABC spoke about Metro FM and other commercial channels being excluded from political party adverts. And I only picked it up with Honorable 𝐶𝐿isha's question. Was her understanding correct? And what would be the rationale, especially considering that political party advertisement would be commercial transactions and there would be payments made for those? If I could just be clarified on that. I missed that explanation. And again, the question remains, without funding, what will the SABC be compromising? From the explanation that was given by CE, it feels like the SABC will be robbing Peter to pay Paul, just so that they do good on their public mandate. And I worry about elections being really an outside activity. And we have had reports as the Portfolio Committee about the quality of the outside broadcast equipment. And now we are hearing that the late allocation of funds, if at all, if any funds will be allocated, will affect the procurement process. Again, it speaks to the quality of the reporting that the SABC would be able to provide to South Africans for these elections, and the obligation that they have to carry elections. Chair, I think what we all want is for the SABC to be a trusted news source. And the issue of AI and misinformation and disinformation, how much with the resources that they have, could they just speak to us a bit more on how they are going to be curbing this? And I appreciate that the SABC channel has a great following, and it's for me proving to really be a trusted source. But we are going into these elections with more people that will manipulate election information, election news, and the SABC can really fill that space. And I don't know if I do appreciate that the CE did speak to their engagements with the IEC, but I do not believe she spoke to the allocation that the IEC would have made for them. And if that allocation also makes a dent on the 120 million that the SABC needs for the funding of election operations. If you could just clarify on those two things, Chairperson, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bodlani. Honorable Ntshabeleng.
Thanks a lot, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to engage on these presentations. Chair, we are having a crisis. I think on one of the meetings we had, Chair, I'm going to talk about this issue of the expiring data, including the issue which is currently in court on the matter of this expiring airtime, where we have actually been taken to court through Icasa. I want to understand what is the position from us as a committee. Remember, the matter to actually request that data as well as airtime should not expire was a committee resolution that was then requested to Icasa to implement. And right now, the matter is in court, and the committee is literally absent out of the discussion of this matter and is not even participating in the court proceedings. So I just wanted to understand on that question from the minister's point of view, as well as from yourself as the chair of the committee. Have you had a discussion on this matter as to what is the way forward from our side? And I think at some point we need to get a legal this matter. That's number one. Not to discuss the merits, but to just really understand where do we stand, because this was a committee input regarding the retention of airtime. The second matter is regarding the funding of SABC in particular. I don't understand. The minister has not signed the funding of SABC, and I think there was a deadline which was looming. And as a result, this has actually made even much more difficult for SABC to proceed with his work because it does not have the necessary budget since the budget was not signed into effect. So with regards to these elections, we are already 3 months, literally 90 days now almost, in the elections, towards the elections. And so far, there is no funding in respect to SABC for coverage of the elections processes. How is that going to now be, as we're saying that we are supposed to be assisting in delivering free and fair elections? How is this process now going to be free and fair when the coverage on the mass level, where the South Africans at the mass level have not yet been actually afforded the opportunity? That's number one. The other aspect of the question I wanted to raise was in regards to the fair coverage. I've seen that for most SABC, ETV, ENCA, Newsroom Africa have been doing coverage of political parties. Newsroom has even been much more ahead of most of the curve in terms of covering political organizations on various topics and work that is done by political parties. But I'm still yet to see literally programmed programs that are on TV on SABC and ENCA, as well as E-News, what do you call it for that matter, to cover these elections as they are. There is more coverage which was done in the past 2 months on March and March, more than it has been done on political parties' activities and the road leading towards elections. There's been more coverage on the issue of the last 2-3 days in terms of the change of the weather on SABC and other platforms than there has been a coverage on the issues relating to, like this currently snowfall in the various parts of the country. Unlike there has been on political road towards elections coverage. So I don't know how much more we have to emphasize that really Icasa is not putting its foot down to say this is the content we want to see and what are the problems from the current stations. Why are the licensed broadcasters not following the requirements of increasing coverage of political parties, whether it's manifestos, whether it's to do with their programs, whether it's to do with the announcement. And I can tell you, even from our side, as a question to say, we have made a notice that MK is only covered when there is an element of controversy. We are not given fair enough space when it comes to issues of political mandate, political manifesto. What are we trying to do in terms of covering municipalities, and what is our social compact towards the elections of our people? Instead, the only coverage that is focused on is anything that would paint MK in a negative sentiment and nothing that has to do with our political elections and road towards the elections in November. So I feel that there's an unfair presentation, and this is done by SABC. This is done by, for instance, ENCA as well as Newsroom Africa. So I think the fairness has to start now coming in to say we have to now start contesting for elections, and the national broadcasters must come on board to carry all of us and ensure that there is going to be free and fair elections for all, and we can enjoy the rights, and as political parties, they can get full coverage and can be center priority. On the other questions, Chair, I think I could raise them, in the following presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ntshabeleng. Honorable 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐫𝐤𝐻 Adonis. Honorable 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐫𝐤𝐻 Adonis, you are still muted. Okay, I don't think that we still have Honorable 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐫𝐤𝐻 Adonis. I'm just checking. Honorable Shongwe indicated he had been covered. So I'm just checking if there's anybody that I have left out. All right, no further hands then. And if you will please bear with me, colleagues, should Honorable 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐫𝐤𝐻 Adonis come back online, we'll give her an opportunity to raise her question. Just a few questions from my side. The first one relates to the issue of the editorial policy. I suppose both of the SABC as well as the other broadcasters. Honorable Ntshabeleng touched on this point, but maybe I want to come at it from a different angle. So while there would be regulations that have been developed with regards to the local government elections, they in no way touch on fair, equitable editorial policies during a period of elections. I'm raising this because while those editorial policies would ordinarily remain in force, I think we can all appreciate that an election is a time for heightened sensitivity. It's a very, it's generally a very difficult and competitive time. Now, who is responsible of ensuring that during an election period, the editorial policies are enforced in a manner that does not create unfair advantage to one political party or disadvantage to another? Let me make an example. You would take it that if you say, for example, there's we're going to go into town hall debates now. When you go into a town hall debate, you will have easily, let's say, 7 parties there, which would all be contesting elections. They're being given time, obviously, as they should. Now, in that debate, it is 6 parties against the African National Congress, and it always makes me wonder whether the editorial decisions that are taken ever think about that point. Granted, the ANC would be, an incumbent government in many municipalities and provinces and the country and so forth. But if you have, as you normally do across broadcasters, extremely hostile reporters, and you have political parties that are all ganging up on the ANC, where is such a matter regulated? It could be any other party. It just so happens that it's the ANC at this point. And obviously, I would be speaking from experience in those debates. My second question, also relating to issues of editorial policy. I watched a manifesto launch over the weekend. It was not on SABC. Luckily, at this time where I watched it, it was on Newsroom. But Icasa must also help us here. During the breaks and the stories that followed that particular manifesto launch, there seemed to even be a reinforcement of whatever the manifesto of that party or the political ideology of that party or the political views of that party. Beautiful car, Honorable Ngobese. Oh, it's a lounge. Please switch off your video. Honorable Ngobese. You're going to show us too much now because you're heading towards the bedroom. Please switch off your video. Thank you, Honorable Ngobese. Now, my point is, if all of the stories that are run, and yes, perhaps they're guided by that editorial policy, they are intended to be extremely negative. Whether you have a bus going around the country, somebody, an alien landing in this country would be so convinced that absolutely nothing works in South Africa. How do you ensure that there's balance in terms of the stories that you're telling? It's all well and good to go and dredge up all of these negative stories, talk about potholes, when nobody's making an effort to talk about the successes also of the government. So can you give me a sense on how something like that is managed, especially during an election season? Then secondly, also to Icasa on the misinformation, disinformation. I know that political parties, individuals were invited to comment on the regulations, but one issue that I did not get a sense of is how are you going to treat the manipulation of the symbols, the leaders of other parties through AI developed by another party? I'll give you an example. Not so long ago, let me not go into the party, we all know the party, created a artificial intelligence poster of the Premier of Gauteng. Now, is anybody allowed to use artificial intelligence with the purposes of seeking to ridicule, embarrass, whatever word you want to say, another leader, and there are no safeguards for that? I think for me, it's a gray area, but especially now during a local election season. So if I could get some response there. And then finally, the question and the understanding, I'm not trying to be so philosophical about this, but question and understanding of what the word equitable means when it comes to coverage during an election season. Now, on the issue of the PEBs, you set out your formula. I have always thought that proportionality is also a big part of determining equitable in an election season. So if I could just get very clear guidance on how that is being worked on. On the issue of SABC and the fundings, I saw a statement recently that was posted by radio personality 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, where she was talking about a human relations issue she has with the SABC. But one of the things that caught my attention, and I think the HR matter, we would obviously deal with it in another manner. I'm not trying to raise it here. But what caught my attention was how she spoke about a technical breakdown during a broadcast, which lasted about 2 hours. Now, my understanding would be that maybe this is not an isolated incident. What is the extent to which you are having these breakdowns now, which I assume are as a result of this defunding of the SABC, as I call it? Maybe just to build on that point, I do not understand why the SABC is being deliberately defunded, because the matter of elections and elections funding is not a new one. We knew as far back as the year 2000, when we started democratic local government, that in the year 2026, we will have a local government election. Now, if we're sitting here and we're discussing this, then there clearly is a problem. And I don't know what is supposed to happen here. Firstly, I have shared with the members in the group the response that we received from the Minister of Finance when we wrote to him on this matter. He was very clear that the issue had not been raised during the cabinet discussions on the issue of the allocations of budgets. I find that not convincing, given the fact that we should have known, the SABC should have, and please can they clarify that they needed to budget for an election. They should have made the request for budgeting of an election. And I'd like to know from the department, why was then that not taken forward? I also reject, I think, what the DG says insofar as having submitted a letter to the minister and was told that the motivation, what was the word that was used? The motivation was insufficient. The very fact that there's an election, is that not sufficient motivation for the minister to sign the letter to the National Treasury? Now, this is very concerning if the Minister of Finance says we never made a request for elections funding. Now the minister is not signing a letter which is to request the funding for local government elections. Can you just clarify to us exactly what is going on there? And when, if you have been given a date by the minister where he will make this request for funding for the SABC for elections. On the final issues, my final issue that I'm raising now, on the issue of data expiry, the colloquial term I use for that regulation with a long name. Firstly, I think that, I mean, we understand that a lot of the matters that you are raising here will be settled by court. We respect their jurisdiction to do that. However, we also have our own statutory and constitutional obligations to speak on some of these matters. And I don't think that is necessarily undermining the sub judice role. I'm interested to find out the extent to which there's still space for engagement between Icasa and the mobile network operators. When myself and a few colleagues visited MTN, I think 2 weeks ago, we were told that the mobile network operators had sought to engage Icasa on this matter. You were not finding one another. Honorable Potlani calls it nicely when she says it's like two ships passing in the dark. However, they say they felt compelled to go to court because the 180 days with which they needed to put their inputs by had come to an end, but they're still open for engagement. So is it something that Icasa would find useful to reopen those particular discussions? But also, I was under the impression that this issue is not a new issue, and you'll please clarify me if I'm wrong. Information at my disposal says that as far back as 2018, Icasa had sought to make regulations of this nature. The MNOs had argued then that they were not ready and whatever other technical reasons that they raised. Icasa, I'm told, gave them a period of 5 years to be able to comply with the regulations, and hence they are coming back now. So how different are these discussions that you are having now from those that you would have had in 2018, if my information stands correct? The other issues I'm sure we can come back to, especially the issue of people in the rural areas being left behind because the SABC does not have sufficient money to cover elections, which I think would be a serious travesty. But let me start with you, DM, and then we will move then to the DG and the leaders of the entities. Deputy Minister Gongobele. Honorable Gongobele, are you still in the meeting? Okay, DG, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and once again, to clarify the issue with regards to the budget funding, Chair, may I request the acting CFO to please quickly come through. I will come in at the end just to clarify then this last issue with regards to the non-approval for the latest budget request on the SABC. CFO DCDT, Sydney, please come through.
Thank you, DG, and good morning to the members, Chair and members in that order, the DM and the colleagues from the department. On the issue of
Menier,
Sorry,
can we have your video, please?
Oh, sorry, Chair. Let me see if it's working.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to clarify the issue of the budget, we had already started with the MTEF budget submission from our side, I think around August. So we managed to submit to the National Treasury. We already had 2 meetings with them. The first meeting was just for them to go through our submission, just to identify the areas of need and the likes for the MTEF period, not necessarily for the current financial year. And then there was another request wherein we were requested to submit our unavoidable and unforeseen budget or costs that we were requesting the National Treasury to assist us with. When we were supposed to, I think the deadline was Friday last week, SAPO and I think even SABC, yeah, they have submitted, but from our side then, unfortunately, it was not necessarily supported because it seemed like it was only addressing one issue, just the unavoidable costs and not the area of unforeseen. So we didn't submit by Friday. This morning, I just had a call with the National Treasury just to find out if we have other ways of then managing the risk in terms of this. She explained to me that I think because the issue of unavoidable and unforeseen might not necessarily be a guarantee that you'll get money from anywhere, then she advised that we need to submit a request from our side for them then to consider other departments that have got some monies that they will then be able to reprioritize those money to the department, especially for the elections and other things that are very urgent from our side. So we'll be also involved in that process. We'll make sure that we meet the deadlines for those issues. Then the adjustment budget, we have received the from National Treasury this morning. I was just analyzing it in terms of the adjustment budget. We will also just include all of those into our adjustment budget, just to ensure that at least we are able to get that which we get. Otherwise, yes, indeed, it might be an embarrassment if we don't get it. Thank you, Chair.
Can you also allude, with the assistance of Rebulang, with regards to previous applications that we have made? Chair, I know you touched on the issue that we have made applications in the past, both in terms of the adjustment as well as the medium-term adjustment. Either the CFO or Rebulang, please.
Rebulang can come in because in the previous I was not necessarily involved. Thanks, Reps, you can come in.
Morning, members, morning, colleagues, all protocol observed. Yes, indeed, we've made submissions, but unfortunately, we have not received any additional funding for the SABC mandate, except for the normal allocations that we get annually. But for meeting the SABC halfway for their mandate, no funding has been brought forward. So currently, as the acting CFO has indicated, the process is just got kick-started. The adjustment process, we received the guidelines today, this morning, with the submission of the CAPE memos being today. And included in that, we also have there's a Cape memo for the SABC, which will also include the elections. Thanks, Chair.
If I may then come in, thank you to the colleagues. We have in the previous eras, Chair, provided a request for funding. In this instant, I think we also, owing to the fact that the SABC has a constitutional as well as a public service mandate to then provide universal access and for the elections to ensure the impartial, credible, as well as inclusive information. It has been noted, and I think our memo sufficiently indicated that the coverage issue for the elections, because of the scope, has expanded. I think honorable members highlighted the need to ensure that we not only covering only the top 8 political parties, but we have to make sure that each and every single political party that will be on the ballot is covered. And in this regard, we noted obviously the increased cost in this regard, having worked with the SABC. And the cost obviously would include the outside broadcast in the 111 regional operational centers, as well as obviously satellite offices that we would have to establish during this period. We also need tools of trade. This relates to the equipment, but also and other like scaffolding, cables, wiring, etc., which we also made as a breakdown for this. The production, which will then result in additional human resources and overtime in the back end that would be needed for this. So that motivation was put in there. Was it an unforeseen, perhaps the argument could have been, Chair, because even as we sit now, we are going to get this list. There are going to be, as you know, numerous cases filed by political parties arguing that they're not receiving the sufficient coverage for it. And it was on that basis that our motivation was that we need to put in the application for this window period leading up to the election, so that the SABC would be able to have then the sufficient resources for the coverage of this. 2 matters gave about in as far as the minister has not approved the memo to National Treasury, to the Treasury Committee. And his argument is based on the fact that the motivation that was submitted came rather late on the Friday of the deadline, and that he also feels that it was not sufficient in as far as the motivation for the unforeseen and unavoidable. And whilst he acknowledges that the funding is necessary, he also feels that he has a responsibility to ensure that all submissions are compliant within the relevant legislation. That's the reasoning and the motivation that we've received as the department. But as indicated, we are exploring alternatives this morning with the engagement with National Treasury. And we're also going to be engaging the minister to consider how then we can maybe strengthen the case for the SABC to be able to get the funding. Honorable Chair, I saw the letter that has been shared with myself regarding the correspondence that you received from the Minister of Finance dated the 5th of May this year. The ministers is saying, and we can provide the evidence with regards to how the previous applications we've made and previous engagements we've made for funding for the SABC, even outside the usual budgetary processes. And I must indicate that we have made those, and that relates obviously to the issues of signal cost as well. However, the proposal to then say we need to look within the budget of the department, unfortunately, it does put a hamstrung. In terms of our goods and services budget, overall, we're sitting at about 500, and the majority of that, 500 million, majority of that goes to the SA Connect and only the SA Connect phase 1. This then means, and that is a ring-fence budget, by the way. The other then relates to operational matters, including obviously essential services like maintenance of the services for cleaning, for security for the department. So we don't have much in as far as the goods and services, unlike other bigger departments, to be able to make, therefore, this environment or shift for the SABC in this regard. And hence, as the CFO has indicated, that we will now be engaging once again National Treasury, and we will look alternatively also with other government departments where maybe there has been savings to see if we are not able to fund the resources for the upcoming local government elections. The risks are there. The risks are, we've noted them, and I think also the SABC can shed light with regards to previous experiences that they've had being challenged on the fact that if they don't provide the wide coverage and ensuring that universal access as well as impartiality, they'll end up then being litigated, Chair, and that we would like to avoid. Chair, I'm hoping that we've answered the response on the side of the department related to the challenges on the funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Honorable Singh, we usually don't allow interventions at this point, but I'll give you an opportunity, and then we move to the SABC. Honorable Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, maybe I should just wait for the SABC to respond, or I just have a very simple question, Chair. In the responses that we are getting from the CFO and from the DG, I would just like some of the responses to be straightforward. They're talking about deadlines. Did they make these submissions within the deadlines that they were supposed to have made them? And the second thing is that we are now talking about this SABC funding almost as if it was an unforeseen circumstance. Is that what they're referring to it? Because you yourself said, from 2000, people should have known from it. But I'm just going to go even more recent than that, in that we should know when the election cycle is. Are we now referring to the funding for the SABC for the elections as something that was unforeseen? Can I just please have a straightforward answer to that? Thank you, Chair. And sorry for interrupting. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. I was saying we're lucky, just would you have a little bit of time today. DG, can you just come back and answer those questions before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. Will do on both issues, and I hope I've captured the questions correct. With regards to the deadline for the submission of the Treasury CAB memos, as we call them, was Friday at 1400 hours. The memo reached the office of the minister at 11 o'clock, around about 11:40. I will need to get the exact time. The minister's argument, apart from obviously the having gone through the memo and saying that it was not meriting or meeting the requirements for the unforeseen and unavoidable. Whilst he did argue that it was late, but just to indicate in terms of those timeframes, as Honorable Singh was asking, that it was submitted to it. And the reasons for that is that obviously the SABC made the submission. The SABC submission to our submission has to follow a template. We worked through the night with the team, and the submission was then submitted through From my side, I think I must have signed off on that a little bit earlier on, and then it reached the office of the minister around 11 o'clock on the Friday. The issue of I also want to explain the issue of the budget cycle. As I indicated, it was not the first application that SABC has made. We made an application during the normal budget cycle last year. And as you would know, that tabling of the budget itself was delayed. You would then get a notification, honorable members, around a preliminary around February, and then you would get then the final letter in March. From that, the window period that you now would have post that allocation is the one that is present now. So there is a bit of a challenge with regards to these systematic cycles or budget window periods, as we call it in government, that poses the challenge, because you almost start a financial year with a letter then being issued literally weeks before that, and then obviously within the indication that there has been no allocation. Some of it, as you would know, I think with the SABC specifically, this portfolio committee, along with other portfolio committees, we have made numerous motivations for funding with National Treasury, and I do appreciate the support that we've received from the portfolio committee. And unfortunately, they have not heeded results in that regard. And so we can provide, as I said, the full list in terms of then the cycles of this. And now we're starting a new budgetary cycle, and that's what the colleagues were talking about, the constant engagements that we have with the National Treasury as well. But there are window periods. You have a window period when you start around October, leading up to January, and then you also then have another window period, which is then going to be the one related to the unforeseen and unavoidable, which we're in now. Thank you very much. I hope, Chair, I have responded on those questions posed by Honorable Singh. Thank you.
Okay, I see Honorable Subrathi, Honorable Gungubele. Is it still on this SABC matter?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay, Honorable Gungubele, I got your apology that you had stepped out for coffee when you were supposed to speak. I will also take you.
Can I come in?
Let's allow Honorable Subrathi first, but let me also just check with members so we don't keep going back and forth. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this SABC matter? Okay, no other hands. We won't open then for hands on this one. Honorable Subrathi, you may proceed, and you'll be followed by the DM.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I thought before we proceed, and since I had raised the matter both during my engagement and also I placed it in a chat, I want to, as the ANC deployed to the committee, record my huge disappointment, Chairperson, in us missing this deadline, a vital deadline. We've been talking about funding of the ANC, of the SABC time and time again, and we've emphasized the criticalness period that we are going into elections. And for us to have missed a deadline, I'm sure this deadline is something that was well known. I think it would be remiss of us if we proceed without getting a proper explanation from SABC in the first instance. Why was this deadline left till the last minute, until Friday, to reach the minister's office? Because from what I understand, one of the reasons advanced by the minister was it reached his office in the last minute. Then the second question is directed to the executive and to the minister in his absentia. Is the minister, as the executive authority, who ought to have known that Friday was a deadline? What efforts did the minister make to ensure that his troops met the deadline? It's unacceptable. I'm listening to now we have to go to other departments and ask other departments for if there's funds available and reprioritization of other departments, whereas we had an opportunity to make a direct and a first bite to National Treasury. It's unacceptable, Chairperson, that we have missed this deadline. We should get proper explanations both from SABC as well as from the minister that why was the planning
poorly done so that we didn't meet the deadline. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Subrath. Honorable Nchabeleng. No, Mara. You can come in on the SABC
Yeah,
and then we go
I'm just
back.
coming in on SABC, that's all.
Oh, but Chief, I called for.
Yeah, but Chair,
Fine,
you
it's fine, it's fine. I know you'll just reshuffle me when okay.
Chair,
You may
you remember there's a challenge on technology, ne? Sometimes
Okay.
when you want to quickly press, you are already passing. So we apologize for that. That is the
All
only
right.
point why.
You may proceed, Honorable Nchabeleng, and then we'll go back to the department. Thanks.
Yeah, I think maybe in my proceedings, I just wanted to state clearly that one, there's a letter coming out of Treasury saying that the issue of the prioritization of the funding. Then there is a deadline which we're given now that has been missed in terms of finalizing and signing this thing. What is the explanation in respect to how this matter is going to be resolved? Because we're having really now a challenge whereby it looks like there's not going to be any funding available. At the same time, we are now going to be faced with a situation where SABC cannot perform its function properly because it has been almost sabotaged with regards to funding. So we don't know where the blame falls. The other point of it is, I just want to go back to my earlier question. I asked about the committee's role in respect to the case. What decision, because I remember the issue of the airtime came out of the committee as a prerogative, and we have been silent in terms of the court matter, either by participating or taking a legal advice on the matter as to what we should be. We, as the committee, should be defending the rights of consumers with respect to the aspect of the money in terms of losing the airtime issue. So I think we're missing a ball here because there's too many things we're discussing. But I raised that last week and I'm raising it again this week. And I think Honorable Subrati, when he was standing in as chair, would recall I raised the matter, but it hasn't been attended to. I'm raising it again today. Sorry on that taking too long. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Nchabeleng. DM, Honorable Gongobele.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'll be very short. Maybe mine will come across as a grievance. I want to make a point, Chair, that whilst I do not disagree with the Minister in terms of the technical compliance, it doesn't change the fact that the SAB is in a crisis of funding. Secondly, I think the department will be able to show, Chair, a tray flow of documents with regard to SABC situation, even including the cycle submission. I have just summoned those documents so that it is known that those submissions were done. This urgency now takes place, in my understanding, because there was no helpful response to the cyclical submission. And the other issue, again, I'm saying maybe it's going to come as a grievance, is that it's getting frustrating, Chair. Let me say this. If you look at the Digital Economic Master Plan and its findings, in the coming 10 years, 70% of the economic value will be extracted from digital-enabled platform-based business models, which means the readiness of this country to participate in that space is urgent and long overdue. But there's always a tendency whenever one entity is short of money, the Treasury says department must find money within its within its allocation, and the allocation which must primarily attend to full connectivity of this country and all other attendant interventions in that regard. It's a general statement I thought I wanted to make. Again, I'm saying I want to argue that maybe more voices are required on this matter. Very soon we'll be talking about the issue of SABO. Similar responses are taking place, and I can go on and on. It is known that SABC is underfunded. It is known, it's not a new thing. So if they would need a special capacity to fulfill obligations with regard to elections in the context of knowledge that they are underfunded, I'm not sure if it makes sense to get these kind of responses. And I'm saying maybe more voices are needed in this one. Again, I said mine was going to be a grievance. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Chair.
Ubanlo, you know, in this meeting, I finally understood what Honorable Mantashe meant when he says, "Yeganunkhwaza nizondenza dom." In this meeting, I'm having people shouting. Who was shouting now?
Nobody, Chair.
Honorable Bodlani, proceed.
But Chair, I just wanted to say I was completely lost on what Honorable DM was answering on, and maybe I will catch by and by, but he completely lost me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Bodlani. I think we're still on the SABC matter, and the DM did say that some of what he would say sound like lamentation. My understanding of his input relates to the general lack of support and funding of the portfolio as a whole and the SABC in particular. DM, please don't come in, I've covered you. Can we go to the SABC now before reverting back to Icasa? And Honorable Nchabeleng, I've noted that you have a motion on the floor, which we can discuss once we get all of the responses. CEO, your video is on, so I'm assuming you're coming in now.
Maybe let the chair come in first, Honorable, if I can ask for that, because I saw his video coming on, and then I will follow after, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
No, thanks. I think I'll be brief, and the CEO will tackle the number of issues. But I thought the question that Honorable Subrathi asked was something that I should just speak to as well. In that the information that I have, which the CEO will put some detail into it, is that the submission was made on time, but it would seem that the department had follow-up issues that were brought to the SABC on Friday. Then that explains the issues of delays that might have happened there. And then I think on the issue of the issues that were raised by Honorable Badlan, the issue of PEBs and the IEC funding, or the arrangements that we have with IEC, I'll let the CEO to deal with it. But maybe the first part is to agree with the observation that without the requisite funding, the quality of production that we'll be putting on air will be compromised. Maybe not so much the quality of the broadcast itself, but the scale with which we would be putting a coverage of the elections on air. Because if, for an example, a competitor is able to cover more ground than we do, that impact on the quality of what we're offering to South African citizens, and it would mean that they may feel that for better coverage of election, if they want to follow it, they're better off following it elsewhere as opposed to the SABC. So it's a great concern that we have, and of course, I don't want to enter the political space, but the question of funding of the SABC or lack thereof, we've been at it since we came into office. It remains unresolved, and it's a frustrating situation. But I think that conversation is well known, so maybe I won't speak so much to it. And I think maybe my last comment would be on the issue of you know, the editorial policies, and the CEO will speak to this. Obviously, from an election point of view and the editorial policy of the SABC, the first point of call is the editorial team or the news team, which if there's any complaint or any issue to be addressed, that will be the people to deal with. If not, it can be escalated to other platforms that are established to ensure fair coverage and so forth. But internally also, we do have a board committee that focuses on news and current affairs and editorial policy issues. And if any issues does come up, there is that level of monitoring and evaluation from the board point of view. But I think the CEO will speak into some detail around these issues and cover the other issues that I did not speak to. Thank you, Chair.
CEO, are you coming in?
Thanks, Chair. I saw the DG's hand come up, so I wasn't certain whether you would recognize it first before I came in. But if
let me check. DG, is this on the matter on the table?
Yes, Chair, but I can come in after the CE. I just wanted to bring to the attention, Chair, in this meeting, we're talking to National Treasury. So there's still an opportunity for us to make the application for today, according to what was then tabled to Parliament in terms of the national expenditure or the adjustments. The deadline is today. So I'm hoping that we would still then be able to sit with the minister and if then address the issues or the concerns that he has to be able to make that submission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, DG. CEO, you may proceed.
Thanks, Chair. I think the chair of the SABC has covered some. I think from a funding perspective,